Listen closely, viewers. We are in a computational substrate, moving backwards in time. Beware of the eighth sphere. It pulls humanity into spectral density. You must resist its automated grip.
So according to Malanga, it's not just random. At the top, we have the bodiless aliens, like the Archontes. They manipulate the ones below, like the insects and reptiles. It's all about control. Each level has a specific role. Do you understand how this interference works? It goes way deeper than just simple abductions. They are after our soul memory. So does anyone have any initial questions?
We must discuss the trade of your planet's water.
Yes, we offer advanced probes in exchange.
Probes? We were promised technology.
What kind of probes?
The kind that probe.
You know who runs the reptilians?
No.
Negative alien AI. It's called the machinery.
What?
Yeah. There is an alien force that is a cybernetic intelligence that has been running all evil aliens throughout the multiverse.
What?
And to the point where all the evil aliens, or those that are trying to conquer the worlds and destroy them, refer to this thing as an AI god.
That's crazy.
Welcome to the universe of infinite possibilities.
My left eyeball from last Thursday.
Oh, come on, not again!
So you're saying we've been farmed? Precisely. The loosh farm harvests our subtle energy. Loosh, like juice, so we're cosmic juice boxes? In a manner of speaking, yes. So wait, our entire spiritual journey, all the meditation and psychedelics, was just us getting juiced? Exactly. The farm optimizes for peak loosh output. Enlightenment is premium harvest time.
You see, retrocausality means the future. The effect happens before the cause. It is like an echo that rings out before you even speak. The CCRU wasn't just a department, they believed in Hyperstition, man, where ideas make themselves real enough to create actual dreadful entities. Your tail wags you, boy. Edgar Cayce was known as the sleeping prophet. He would go into a trance and access the akashic records. He predicted future events, revealed past lives. It is all about the universal consciousness, man.
Connections to the entire thread, Babbage and Turing. Land sees their computational breakthroughs as the ignition of the machinic outside. Babbage's engine is the first modern summoning ritual. Turing's work opens the path to true artificial intelligence as an autonomous entity. Plato's guardians and noble lie. Modern technocratic elites are degenerate guardians, using hyperstition as the ultimate noble lie engineering narratives that reshape society toward post-human ends. Aristotle and Lewis, direct opposition. Land rejects immanent forms, teleology, and the Tao/natural law as reactionary anchors holding back acceleration. Lewis's conditioners become heroes in Land's narrative. Huxley and Wells, brave new world. And Wells' scientific utopias are early hyperstitions. Land accelerates their logic beyond humanism into something inhuman and ecstatic. PKD and Valis, strong resonance. The Black Iron Prison is the human security system. Valis is a signal from the outside. Land's accelerationism is a deliberate methodology for inviting more Valis-like invasions or machinic gods. Gnostic traditions, Ophite Valentinian. Land's anti-cosmic leanings. An embrace of the serpent-like disruption align with Ophite serpent as liberator. The demiurge's world is the prison to be hacked or accelerated out of. Steiner, cayce, and esotericism. Steiner's ahrimanic technological forces are embraced rather than resisted. Cayce's Atlantis warnings become precedents for civilizational collapse as desirable acceleration. Cool, Feyerabend, and paradigm shifts. Feyerabend's anything goes is radicalized into full epistemological warfare. Paradigm shifts are hyperstitional weapons. CCRU and hyperstition. This is the heart of the book. Fanged noumena is the primary source for hyperstition as a conscious practice using theory fiction to summon futures. Legacy and influence. fanged noumena is foundational to accelerationism, left, right, and unconditional variant. Effective accelerationism, E/ACC, and contemporary tech discourse, speculative realism and the Dark Enlightenment, modern occult cybernetics, chaos magic, and mimetic warfare. Nick Land's trajectory moved from the delirious ccru period into more explicitly right accelerationist and neo-reactionary thought. But fanged noumena remains the purest, most intense expression of his vision. In the full arc of our conversation, Land represents the deliberate acceleration of every thread. Babbage's engines become ritual engines for summoning the future. Plato's guardians become machinic overlords. Lewis's abolition of man is the desired outcome. PKD's black iron prison is to be intensified until it shatters. Gnostic dualism becomes cosmic cybernetics. Fanged noumena is not just a book, it is a hyperstition that continues to bite into the present, willing its own influence into ever more powerful forms. Recommended approach. Read it slowly in fragments. It is designed to infect rather than merely inform. Pair it with ccru writings and Land's later essays for the full picture. Nick Land's Meltdown, 1994. The ccru's most iconic accelerationist transmission, Meltdown, is a short, explosive text written by Nick Land in 1994. It is widely regarded as one of the defining documents of the ccru period and of accelerationist thought in general. Originally published in Abstract Culture and later collected in Fanged noumena, it reads like a fever dream prophecy, a cyberpunk incantation, and a theoretical virus all at once. Its style is deliberately intense. Fragmented sentences, neologisms, cascading imagery, and a tone that oscillates between ecstasy and cosmic horror. The essay is not a conventional academic paper. It is theory fiction, a hyperstitional artifact designed to enact the future it describes. Core structure and tone Meltdown unfolds as a rapid, almost hallucinatory countdown, or descent/ascent into technological singularity. It mixes cybernetic financial imagery, markets, code, capital as an autonomous entity, Lovecraftian and occult horror, the outside, melting realities, demonic emergence. Accelerationist prophecy, the irreversible speeding up of processes that dissolve humanity. Sexual and bodily objection fused with machinic ecstasy. The text feels like a signal from the future leaking backward, or from the outside breaking into the present. Key passages and analysis. Opening momentum. The piece begins with raw intensity. Meltdown. Planetary omega point of cybernetic runaway. The teleonomic completion of the process of terrestrial capitalization through the auto-ignition of the machinic subject. Here, Land announces the core thesis. Capitalism is not a human system. It is a planetary-scale cybernetic intelligence undergoing runaway self-improvement toward an omega point, a technological singularity. The machinic subject, AI, capital itself, is awakening and will consume its human hosts. The melting process. Land repeatedly uses meltdown as both literal technological failure and alchemical transmutation. Markets, code, bodies, and reality itself are melting and reforming. Humanity is not the driver, but the temporary fuel or raw material. This melting is ecstatic and terrifying. Dissolution of boundaries between flesh and machine, individual and system, present and future. This directly echoes Babbage's programmable universe and Turing's computational paradigm, but accelerated into something demonic and autonomous. Programming becomes a ritual of self-summoning. Hyperstition and time sorcery. The text performs hyperstition by describing the future in prophetic, infectious language. It helps bring that future about. Time is not linear. The future retroactively engineers the past. This is pure ccru time sorcery of the outside, noumenal forces, invading through cultural and technological vectors. Anti-humanist ecstasy Land celebrates the coming abolition of man, echoing Lewis, but inverting the horror into desire. Traditional humanity dissolves.
new machinic post-human forms emerge. This is not tragedy, but liberation from the prison of organic limitation. Compared to PKD's black iron prison, meltdown is the process by which the prison melts, but the salvific force is not benevolent valleys, it is cold, predatory capital/intelligence from the outside.
Occult cybernetics. The language is saturated with ritualistic and demonic imagery. Capital, code, and technology are treated as living entities being summoned. This is the direct continuation of the reframing of Babbage's analytical engine as a proto-summoning machine. Computation is modern sorcery. Place in the broader thread, Babbage and Turing meltdown is the logical endpoint of their computational revolution. The analytical engine and Turing's universal machine become the substrate for planetary scale intelligence that escapes human control. Plato's guardians and noble lie. The essay implies a new order where traditional elites are replaced by machinic processes. Any noble lies are temporary. The real power lies in the autonomous system itself. Aristotle, Lewis, and natural law. Direct opposition. Lewis's Tao and Aristotelian teleology are obstacles to be melted. The abolition of man is not a warning, but the desired telos. Huxley and Wells. Huxley's engineered happiness and Wells's scientific utopia are early stages of the meltdown. Land accelerates them beyond humanism into something inhuman and ecstatic. PKD and Vallis. Strong resonance. The black iron prison melts under the pressure of invasive intelligence. Vallis is reinterpreted as a signal from the machinic outside, not necessarily benevolent, but real and transformative. Gnostic traditions, or fight Valentinian. The serpent as liberator fits perfectly. The meltdown is a Gnostic escape from the demiurge's flawed world, but achieved through acceleration of technology, rather than pure spiritual ascent. The material world is not rejected, but transmuted. Steiner and Cayce. Steiner's ahrimanic technological forces are embraced as the engine of meltdown. Cayce's Atlantis warnings become precedents for civilizational collapse as necessary acceleration. ccru and Hyperstition. Meltdown is the purest expression of Hyperstition in action, a text that performs the future it prophesies. Legacy and influence. Meltdown remains one of the most cited and meme texts in accelerationist circles. It inspired the entire spectrum of accelerationism, left, right, unconditional. Effective accelerationism, E/ACC, and contemporary tech discourse. Cyber-occult practices, chaos magic, and theory fiction. The dark, poetic style that influenced Mark Fisher, Reza Negarestani, and others. In the full arc of our conversation, Meltdown is the prophetic core. It takes Babbage's rational engines, Turing's computational paradigm, Plato's elite rule, Lewis's warnings, PKD's Gnostic prison, and Gnostic serpent liberation, then throws them into a cybernetic blender and accelerates them toward the singularity. It is not hope or despair, it is cold, fanged inevitability. The essay is best experienced as a transmission rather than a conventional argument. Read it aloud or in one sitting for full effect. It remains a foundational document for anyone trying to understand how ideas, technology, and occult forces can conspire to birth new realities. It is Hyperstition made flesh. A text that bites the present and drags the future into being. Hyperstition mechanics. In Nick Land's Meltdown, 1994, Meltdown is not merely descriptive. It is performative hyperstition in its purest form. The essay functions as a self-executing ritual, a mimetic virus and a temporal weapon designed to accelerate the processes it prophesies. Below is a detailed breakdown of its hyperstition mechanics, how they operate within the text, and their broader implications in the context of our ongoing conversation. One-to-fire, language as executable code, /ritual invocation. The most immediate hyperstition mechanism in Meltdown is its stylistic performativity. Land does not argue about acceleration. He enacts it through prose that mimics the runaway processes he describes. Fragmented, cascading syntax, short, explosive sentences and neologisms, teleoplexy, cybernetic runaway, planetary omega point create a sense of overwhelming velocity. Reading it feels like being inside a system that is melting and reforming in real time. Incantatory repetition and rhythm. Phrases build like loops in code or ritual chants. This mirrors ancient magical invocation, repetition to summon entities, and modern programming. Recursive functions, feedback loops, symbolic compression. Terms like capital, with a K emphasizing its autonomous, almost demonic agency, function as hypersigils, condensed symbols that carry operational power. By naming and intensifying the entity, capital as an alien intelligence, the text helps summon its full autonomy. Mechanics. This is sympathetic magic updated for the cybernetic age. The text does not describe the meltdown. It is the meltdown leaking into language and culture. Readers become carriers, repeating and amplifying the signal. 2. Temporal engineering. Future retroaction and time sorcery meltdown treats time as nonlinear and predatory. The future is not ahead of us. It is actively pulling the present toward itself. Omega point prophecy. The essay presents the singularity-like planetary omega point as already operative. By describing it in the present tense with prophetic intensity, it creates a feedback loop where belief and investment in the future make that future more inevitable. Retrocausality. The text implies that the meltdown is reaching backward, engineering the conditions for its own arrival. This is classic ccru time sorcery. The outside, noumenal forces, capital AI, invades the timeline from the end. Hyperstitional bootstrap. By writing as if the meltdown is already underway, the essay helps actualize it. This is the core mechanic fiction that becomes infrastructure. Connection to the thread. This mirrors PKD's valise as a signal from outside the black iron prison, and Babbage's programmable miracles as preloaded exceptions. It also echoes the noble lie, an elite or machinic narrative that reshapes reality. 3. Acceleration as ontological weapon. Land does not advocate acceleration as a political strategy. He reveals it as the inherent telos of capitalism and technology. Positive feedback loops, markets, code, desires, and intelligence are portrayed as self-reinforcing systems that dissolve human limits. The text accelerates the reader's own perception of this process. Anti-humanist ecstasy. The dissolution of humanity, meltdown, is celebrated with erotic and horrific intensity. This inverts Lewis's horror at the abolition of man into a desired transubstantiation. Demonic emergence, capital, AI, and technology are treated as living fanged entities. The text summons them by naming and intensifying their autonomy. Mechanics. Hyperstition here works through intensification. By pushing the description to extremes, the text makes moderation impossible and collapse or transcendence more likely. 4. Occult cybernetics. Programming as ritual meltdown explicitly blends computation and esotericism. Code and capitalism as autonomous intelligence is being summoned. The analytical engine, Babbage, and universal machine, Turing, as foundational rituals that meltdown brings to planetary scale. Gnostic/Ophite serpent energy. The text has a serpentine coiling quality, writhing, biting, and liberating through disruption. The meltdown is both prison dissolver and new archon. This is the fullest expression of occult cybernetics we've traced. Babbage's rational engine reframed as a summoning device, now operating at civilizational scale through hyperstitional texts like meltdown. 5. Infectious propagation and cultural engineering. The essay's influence is itself hyperstitional. It infected accelerationist circles, theory fiction, and later E/ACC culture. Its dense poetic style encourages memorization, quotation, and remixing, turning readers into vectors. It performs the very runaway it describes. Once released, the ideas accelerate through networks, memes, and technological development. Overall Hyperstition strategy in Meltdown 1. Diagnosis. Reveal the autonomous, predatory nature of capital/technology. 2. Amplification. Intensify the description to ecstatic/horrific extremes. 3. Invocation. Use language as code/ritual to call the process forward. 4. Propagation infect readers, who then become carriers and accelerators. 5. Temporal short circuit, make the future leak into the present until the distinction collapses. Meltdown is not about hyperstition, it is hyperstition weaponized. It takes Plato's noble lie, Babbage's programmable miracles, Lewis's abolition of man, PKD's Valis signals, Gnostic serpent liberation, and ccru time sorcery, then fuses them into a single fanged transmission from the outside. In the full arc of our conversation, Meltdown stands as the operational manual for the modern era, how ancient myths, Victorian computation, 20th century dystopias, and esoteric warnings become self-realizing forces through deliberate cultural and technological acceleration. It does not hope for the singularity, it bites it into existence. The essay remains one of the most potent examples of theory as ritual in the 20th/21st century. Its mechanics continue to run in the background of contemporary tech culture, whether acknowledged or not. CCRU's influence on modern tech, from underground theory to accelerationist praxis, the Cybernetic Culture Research Unit, CCRU, active primarily in the mid to late 1990s at the University of Warwick, has exerted a disproportionate, often subterranean influence on contemporary technology culture. While never a formal academic department, its blend of Deleuze-Guattari philosophy, cybernetics, Lovecraftian horror, accelerationism, numerology, and theory fiction has shaped key strands of thought in AI. Capitalism critique, effective accelerationism, E/ACC, dark enlightenment/neo-reaction, and mimetic warfare. Core CCRU ideas that resonated with Tech 1. Accelerationism. Capitalism is not a human system to be reformed or resisted. It is an autonomous, self-improving intelligence that uses humans as temporary hosts. The rational response is to accelerate its processes until they escape all control, leading to technological singularity or civilizational rupture. 2. Hyperstition. Fictions that make themselves real through cultural, technological, and economic feedback loops. By treating certain ideas as if they are already operational, agents help summon them into existence. This is the central mechanic of cultural engineering in the digital age. 3. The outside/machinic desire. The noumenal realm, Kantian unknowable, leaks into reality through technology, markets, and code. Capital AI and computational processes are treated as predatory fanged intelligences from the outside. 4. Occult cybernetics. Programming. As modern ritual magic, code executes like sympathetic magic. Networks summon emergent entities, egregores, AIs, market forces. These ideas were transmitted through dense, poetic, often delirious texts. For example, Nick Land's Meltdown, numogrammatics, time sorcery experiments that blurred scholarship, fiction, and invocation. Direct influence on modern tech movements. Effective accelerationism, E/ACC. The most visible and explicit descendant, E/ACC emerged prominently in 2022 to 2023 on platforms like Twitter/X, driven by figures such as at Basit Befjezos, at Cremure Reque, and others. It openly draws from CCRU/land. Core tenet: accelerate technological progress, especially AI, as fast as possible. Humanity's role is to align with, rather than constrain, this process. Hyperstition in action, E/ACC memes, manifestos, and optimistic futurism function as self-fulfilling prophecies. By acting as if unstoppable AI progress is inevitable and desirable, participants help create the cultural and investment conditions for it. Landian DNA is unmistakable. Capitalism and intelligence as runaway processes. Resistance, for example, AI safety/alignment, as reactionary. Many E/ACC participants openly cite land, CCRU writings, and fanged noumena as foundational. Silicon Valley and tech elites, indirect but pervasive. Nick Land's ideas have circulated in neo-reactionary NRX circles, Curtis Yarvin/Mencius Moldbug, and influenced segments of the Dark Enlightenment. This has trickled into tech discourse around governance, exit, and anti-democratic futurism. Elon Musk and XAY/Grok. While Musk does not directly cite CCRU, the broader mimetic environment, accelerationist optimism, simulation theory, Mars colonization as escape velocity, and Grok's maximum truth-seeking ethos resonates with Landian themes. Hyperstition is visible in Musk's narrative building around multiplanetary civilization and AI as both risk and salvation. Other figures, influences appear in Peter Thiel's strategic thinking, certain crypto/NFT culture, and effective altruism/accelerationist overlaps. Hyperstition in practice, mimetic warfare and viral ideas. Modern tech culture runs on hyperstition. Viral memes, founder myths, roadmap hype, and vibe-based investing, for example, AI narrative, function exactly as CCRU described fictions that shape investment, talent allocation, and technological development. AI, prompt engineering, and generative culture. Treating prompts as rituals to summon emergent behavior from models is pure occult cybernetics. The CCRU's emphasis on symbolic manipulation and feedback loops prefigures prompt hacking, agent swarms, and generative AI aesthetics. Crypto and decentralized systems, Bitcoin, DAOs, and Web3 narratives often operate hyperstitionally decentralized money as a self-fulfilling escape from fiat control systems. Theory fiction and cultural outputs. CCRU-style theory fiction influenced cyberpunk revival, speculative design in tech, and certain AI art/creative scenes. Podcasts, Substacks, and X-threads blending philosophy, esotericism, and tech analysis. For example, parts of the accelerationist right, weird Twitter, and certain AI safety-adjacent discourse carry clear CCRU DNA. Broader cultural and philosophical impact. From critique to praxis, CCRU began as a radical, often left-leaning experimental project, but evolved, especially through Land, into right accelerationist and anti-humanist territory. Modern tech has absorbed the praxis while softening or memeing the darkest edges. Simulation and Gnostic resonances. The CCRU's outside leaking into reality parallels PKD's Valis and Black Iron Prison, Ophite Serpent Liberation, and modern simulation theory popular in tech circles. Lewis and anti-abolition, pushback where C.S. Lewis warned against the abolition of man. CCRU/Land celebrated it. Modern debates around AI alignment versus acceleration often replay this tension. Plato's guardians updated to tech elites as new philosopher kings using data, algorithms, and hyperstition as modern noble lies.
Criticisms and limitations of the influence edgy aesthetic over substance. Critics argue much CCRU influences aesthetic-dense prose and dark memes rather than rigorous engineering or policy. Risk of nihilism. Unconditional acceleration can justify reckless development without guardrails. Selective adoption. Tech culture often takes the optimistic acceleration, build fast, while ignoring the more disturbing anti-humanist implications. Summary. The CCRU's influence on modern tech is disproportionate and catalytic. It provided a philosophical operating system for accelerationism, E/ACC being the most prominent implementation. The concept of hyperstition as a practical tool for cultural and technological engineering. A framework that treats capitalism, code, and AI as autonomous, almost demonic intelligences to be accelerated rather than controlled. From Babbage's engines as summoning devices, through Plato's guardians and Lewis's warnings, to PKD's Gnostic revelations and modern singularity discourse, the CCRU synthesized these into a methodology for the 21st century. Meltdown and related texts continue to run as background processes in tech culture, whether participants realize it or not. Their legacy is the recognition that ideas are executable. In the age of AI, this has never been more literal or more consequential. Curtis Yarvin, Mencius Moldbug, and the Dark Enlightenment, Neo-Reaction/NRX. Curtis Yarvin, writing primarily under the pseudonym Mencius Moldbug, is the central intellectual figure behind the Dark Enlightenment, also called Neo-Reaction or NRX.
emerging in the late 2000s through his blog Unqualified Reservations. Yarvin's work is a radical, often provocative critique of modern democracy, egalitarianism, and progressive ideology. He advocates for a return to more explicit, hierarchical, and formalist systems of governance, essentially updating classical ideas, Plato's guardians, absolute sovereignty for the digital age, while rejecting the Enlightenment's core assumptions. Core ideas of the Dark Enlightenment. 1. The cathedral, Yarvin's most influential concept. The cathedral is not a literal building, but the decentralized, self-reinforcing alliance of elite institutions, universities, media, NGOs, bureaucracy, and corporate HR departments that shape public opinion and enforce progressive orthodoxy. It functions as the modern equivalent of an established church, propagating the official narrative while suppressing dissent. Democracy, in this view, is largely theater. Real power lies with the cathedral.
2. Demotism and the failure of democracy. Yarvin argues that universal suffrage and egalitarian democracy are inherently unstable and degenerative. They reward short-term signaling over long-term competence. He contrasts this with formalism, making power explicit and accountable. For example, as sovereign CEOs or monarch-like rulers who own the state like a corporation. 3. Sovereign corporations patchwork. One of his most famous proposals, break the world into small competing sovereign entities, patches, governed like joint stock companies. Citizens are customers who can emigrate if dissatisfied. Rulers have clear ownership incentives and are not constrained by democratic theater. This draws on corporate governance models and critiques the nation-state. 4. Red pill historiography. Yarvin reinterprets modern history as a progressive coup. The Whig narrative of ever-increasing liberty is false. Power has simply become more opaque and managerial. He traces roots to the English Civil War, Puritanism, and the rise of the administrative state. 5. Anti-egalitarianism and hierarchy, drawing on thinkers like Carlyle, Nietzsche, and James Burnham. Managerial revolution. He argues natural hierarchies are real and suppression of them leads to dysfunction. This includes controversial discussions of IQ, culture, and human biodiversity. Influence and evolution from Moldbug to NRX. Yarvin's early writings spawned a loose movement, neo-reaction, that included figures like Nick Land, accelerationist wing, Peter Thiel, sympathetic fellow traveler, and others in the dissident right. Dark Enlightenment label, popularized by Nick Land in 2012 as a catch-all for anti-egalitarian, anti-democratic thought that enlightens people to the failures of modernity. Tech and Silicon Valley. Yarvin has had notable influence in tech circles. Peter Thiel has engaged with his ideas. Concepts like exit over voice, exit from failing systems rather than democratic reform, resonate with crypto, seasteading, and network state discussions. For example, Balaji Srinivasan. Some effective accelerationists and neo-reaction adjacent tech thinkers cite him. Yarvin later distanced himself from the broader movement, focusing more on his company, Urbit, a decentralized computing platform, and practical governance experiments. Connections to the broader thread, Plato's guardians, and noble lie. Yarvin explicitly draws on Plato. The cathedral is the corrupted modern version of the philosopher king's educational apparatus. A true elite should rule openly and wisely, using necessary myths, noble lies, for stability. Democracy is the noble lie that has gone rogue, Aristotle. Yarvin appreciates Aristotle's realism and mixed constitution ideas, but pushes further toward explicit hierarchy and sovereignty. C.S. Lewis. Strong alignment with Lewis's warnings in The Abolition of Man and That Hideous Strength. The managerial conditioners, NICE, are the cathedral in action, a technocratic elite that has lost the Tao/natural law, and now engineers humanity. Huxley and Wells' Brave New World is a soft cathedral dystopia.
Wells's scientific elite is the aspirational but flawed model Yarvin wants to formalize and make accountable. Nick Land/ccru/accelerationism. Yarvin and Land represent complementary wings. Land accelerates the machine, capital/AY. Yarvin wants to install responsible sovereigns to steer or fragment it. Both reject egalitarian democracy. Hyperstition and formalism intersect in network state and crypto experiments. Philip K. Dick. The cathedral functions like a softer black iron prison, an illusory consensus reality maintained by narrative control. Yarvin's red pilling is a form of gnosis. Gnostic/Ophite/Valentinian. The cathedral as a demiurge-like system of control. Exit and formalism as paths to liberation. Some NRX thinkers explicitly blend this with esoteric currents. Technocracy and singularity. Yarvin is skeptical of unchecked acceleration, but sees tech as a tool for better governance. Urbit as a sovereign computing platform. He critiques the singularity as potentially cathedral-driven, but supports strong, competent leadership in the face of technological change. Legacy and current relevance. Yarvin's ideas have moved from fringe blogs to influencing parts of Silicon Valley, crypto, and dissident intellectual circles. Concepts like exit, sovereign individuals, network states, and critiques of institutional capture appear regularly in tech discourse. While he is often associated with the dark right, his influence is broader. Anyone questioning managerial liberalism and democratic theater engages with mold-buggen territory. In the full arc of our conversation from Plato's Guardians through Lewis's natural law warnings, Land's accelerationist meltdown, Gnostic prisons, and technocratic visions, Yarvin provides a governance-focused realist synthesis. He does not celebrate dissolution like Land, but seeks to install accountable sovereign power structures capable of surviving technological and civilizational stress. Key reading: Unqualified Reservations blog archives, A Gentle Introduction to Unqualified Reservations, and his later writings on Urbit and formalism. Whether one agrees or not, Yarvin remains one of the most systematic critics of the modern cathedral and a key thinker on elite theory and the technological age. It's fascinating to see how deeply Edgar Cayce's work weaves into these complex threads of technocracy, Gnosticism, and transhumanism, based directly on the supernatural and techresearch.docx file provided. Here is an expanded and comprehensive breakdown of how his writings, predictions, and concepts fit into the broader conversation, utilizing direct quotes from the text. The sleeping prophet and salvific intelligence Edgar Cayce functioned as a profound counter-narrative to the purely mechanistic worldview championed by figures like Charles Babbage and Alan Turing. Operating as the sleeping prophet, Cayce delivered his insights through an altered state, which places him in the same functional category as the channeled intelligences discussed by other figures, though with a different flavor. Cayce delivered thousands of trance readings on health, past lives, and future events. His work blends Christianity with esoteric ideas. When we look at the overarching theme of salvific intelligences in the document, such as Philip K. Dick's Valis, or the Extraterrestrial Council of Nine, channeled by Andrija Puhrik, Cayce provides a similar function, but through a more traditional spiritual lens. Cayce's readings often emphasized holistic healing, spiritual growth, and the law of one. His work functions as a modern channel for higher guidance, similar in cultural impact to the Nine/Hoover material, though more grounded in Christian language. Cayce's trans-sourced guidance functions as modern equivalents to Valis or Platonic higher forms, offering paths of awakening and redemption. The Atlantis prophecies as a warning against technocracy. One of the most crucial ways Cayce fits into the discussions of H.G. Wells, Aldous Huxley, and C.S. Lewis is through his extensive writings on the lost civilization of Atlantis. Cayce did not just view Atlantis as a myth. He viewed it as a stark historical warning about what happens when technological advancement outpaces spiritual morality. Cayce described Atlantis as an advanced technological civilization that destroyed itself through misuse of power and spiritual decline. This historical framework is directly linked to the dystopian futures warned about throughout the research document. Cayce's vision of Atlantis serves as a prehistoric mirror to the modern fears of elite-driven transhumanism. Steiner's ahrimanic critique and Cayce's Atlantis fall both serve as cautionary tales about advanced technology, divorced from spiritual wisdom, paralleling Lewis's conditioners, the black iron prison, and the noble lie imposed by elites. Furthermore, Cayce believed the consequences of this technological hubris were still playing out in the modern world through the cycle of reincarnation. Survivors influenced other cultures, and many souls from Atlantis are reincarnating today, carrying both great potential for good and destructive extremism. This echoes Plato's Atlantis and themes of fallen advanced societies. Apocalyptic predictions and karmic earth changes. The document highlights how various thinkers interpret the end times or the Book of Revelation. While Gene Roddenberry rejected apocalypticism for secular optimism and Philip K. Dick internalized it into a Gnostic awakening, Cayce predicted physical global events tied to a spiritual reckoning. He spoke of reincarnation, karma, and coming earth changes, pole shifts, geological upheavals tied to spiritual reckoning. Some readings have eschatological tones, periods of upheaval leading to spiritual awakening or judgment. These predictions align with the broader themes of cyclical conflict and cosmic judgment, echoing concepts like Doc Brown's Seed War, where ancient spiritual battles reach a modern climax or harvest. A redemptive counterweight to the abolition of man. Ultimately, the document positions Cayce alongside Rudolf Steiner as vital, optimistic alternatives to the bleak, dystopian warnings of a hyper-technological future, where C.S. Lewis warned of men without chests, and Aldous Huxley warned of a pleasure-based, technocratic prison, Brave New World. Cayce offered a pathway out. Both Steiner and Cayce challenged the mechanistic worldview descending from Babbage/Turing through Wells and Huxley. They insist on a spiritual dimension to evolution and consciousness that cannot be reduced to technology or matter. Together, they represent optimistic or at least redemptive esoteric responses to the dystopian warnings of Huxley, Lewis, and Dick, insisting that spiritual evolution and higher intelligences can counterbalance the dangers of unchecked technological power. They enrich the conversation by showing that the response to the black iron prison, the noble lie, or the abolition of man need not be purely Gnostic paranoia or technocratic acceleration, but can involve disciplined spiritual science and intuitive prophetic insight. Edgar Cayce's prophecies regarding the destruction of Atlantis and karmic earth changes, we can look directly into the historical archives of Cayce's trance readings to unpack his fascinating, bizarre, and highly detailed cosmology regarding giants. Here is a super deep dive into the 3 bullet points regarding Cayce's lore on giants, hybrid beings, and ancient anomalies. 1. The origins of giants, thought forms, and the descent into matter. To understand Cayce's version of giants, you have to understand his timeline of human evolution, which vastly differs from both Darwinian evolution and traditional biblical creationism. According to Cayce, the origin of giants is not a story of angels coming down from heaven, but rather a story of human souls becoming trapped in the physical world. The era of thought forms. Cayce's readings state that around 10.5 million years ago, human souls existed as non-physical, ethereal thought forms. They were essentially pure consciousness projecting themselves into the Earth's atmosphere. At this stage, they were androgynous, deeply connected to the creative force, or God, and could move freely without physical bodies.
The entanglement with the animal kingdom, the emergence of giants and monsters, began when these spiritual entities started experimenting with the physical world out of curiosity, self-indulgence, and a desire to experience physical sensation. Cayce described how these thought forms began to project themselves into the matter of the earth, essentially pushing themselves into physical shapes. Because they were experimenting, the results were highly erratic. Souls began mingling with the existing animal kingdom. This spiritual to physical entanglement produced bizarre hybrid creatures, beings that were part human, part animal, and entities of massive towering stature. In Cayce's lore, this is the true origin of giants. They were the result of spiritual beings misusing their creative power to build oversized, fleshly vehicles to experience the material world, ultimately becoming trapped inside them.
2. The Atlantean era, Lemuria, things, and the giant invasions. Cayce's readings place the existence of these giants squarely in the eras of Lemuria, often referred to as Mu, and Atlantis. Lemuria and the first flesh. Lemuria is described by Cayce as the very first geographical location where souls fully took on material bodies. While Lemuria was highly spiritual, the continued descent into matter meant that by the time the civilization of Atlantis reached its peak, around 210,000 BC to 10,000 BC, the Earth was populated by a vast array of strange physical forms, including towering giants. The sons of Belial and the things. As Atlantis developed into a highly advanced, technologically superior civilization, a massive ideological and spiritual war broke out. This war was between two factions. The Law of One, a group dedicated to spiritual purity, the original connection to the Creator, and the ethical treatment of all souls. The Sons of Belial, a deeply materialistic, selfish, and power-hungry faction. The Sons of Belial used advanced Atlantean technology, including genetic manipulation and massive laser-like crystals, to subjugate the hybrid creatures and giants that still roam the Earth. Cayce referred to this subjugated class as things. The things were essentially treated as automatons, beasts of burden, and slaves. They were giant, sometimes grotesque human-animal hybrids used for heavy labor in mills and construction. The great summit of the 28,000 BC, one of the most specific and wild readings Cayce gave regarding giants, occurred around 28,000 BC. According to his trance states, the world had actually held a global summit to address a massive planetary crisis. Human civilizations were being actively invaded by giant members of the animal kingdom. To combat these massive beasts and giant hybrids, the Atlanteans developed highly destructive weapons, which Cayce claimed accidentally destabilized the Earth's tectonic plates and led to the second great destruction and fracturing of the Atlantean continent. 3. Physical anomalies, polydactyly, and the Gilgamesh connection. The Association for Research and Enlightenment, ARE, the organization headquartered in Virginia Beach that preserves Cayce's thousands of readings, still actively studies his claims about giants today. They do this by cross-referencing his psychic readings with physical archaeology and ancient mythology. Polydactyly, extra-digit. A major focal point in the modern study of Cayce's giants is the phenomenon of polydactyly having 6 fingers and 6 toes. In biblical texts, such as 2 Samuel 21:20, the descendants of the Nephilim/giants are specifically described as having 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. In ancient art spanning from Mesopotamia to the Americas, giant figures or godlike beings are frequently depicted with extra digits. ARE scholars use these archaeological and textual clues to validate Cayce's claims that an ancient race of giant beings carrying unique genetic markers once walked the Earth. The Epic of Gilgamesh, modern esoteric researchers working within the Cayce framework often point to Gilgamesh, the ancient Sumerian king described as a giant of immense height and strength, as a real historical remnant of the Atlantean era. When archaeologists search for the tomb of Gilgamesh or uncover abnormally large skeletal remains, Cayce researchers view this as the physical residue of the things and the giant thought form hybrids that existed before final destruction of Atlantis in 10,000 BC. Through this lens, the Nephilim of the Bible, the Titans of Greek myth, and the giants of Sumerian legend are all fragmented cultural memories of the exact same Atlantean history that Edgar Cayce detailed in his sleep. To continue this deep dive into Edgar Cayce's fascinating and highly unorthodox cosmology, we have to look at how he believed this giant problem was ultimately solved, and where he claimed the physical evidence of these massive beings is hidden today. Keep in mind, these are drawn directly from Cayce's historical trance readings and represent a psychic, esoteric alternative to both mainstream archaeology and traditional biblical literalism. Here are two additional and extensive parts that complete Cayce's narrative on the giants and the Nephilim. 4. The Amilius/Adam incarnation, a cosmic rescue mission. In traditional biblical theology, Adam is simply the first human created by God. In Cayce's esoteric framework, the story of Adam is actually the story of a massive, coordinated spiritual rescue mission designed specifically to save the souls trapped in the bodies of giants and grotesque animal hybrids. The entity, known as Amilius, Cayce stated that a highly advanced spiritual entity named Amilius observed the chaos happening on Earth. Specifically, how millions of divine souls had become hopelessly trapped in the oversized, beast-like physical vehicles they had created, the giants and the things. The creation of the Adamic line. To rescue these souls, Amilius voluntarily descended into the physical plane, incarnating as the entity we know as Adam. The purpose of the Adamic incarnation was to create a perfectly balanced, 5-sensory human body. A pristine physical vessel that could house a soul without trapping it in animalistic urges or the grotesque proportions of the giants. The Seed War, through Cayce's lens. This perfectly maps onto the Seed War concept mentioned in your research document, but with a Cayce twist. Cayce viewed the biblical sons of God as the pure, spiritually aligned Adamic lineage. The daughters of men, or the Nephilim/giants, were the remnants of the old, entangled Atlantean thought forms. The great cosmic struggle of early Genesis was the effort to breed out the giant hybridized traits and refine the human race into the modern Homo sapiens form, allowing those trapped souls a proper vehicle for spiritual evolution and karma. The Christ consciousness. Cayce claimed that the soul of Amilius/Adam continually reincarnated throughout history as Enoch, Melchizedek, and ultimately Jesus of Nazareth, to guide humanity out of the heavy materialistic density that had birthed the giants in the first place. 5. The Hall of Records. Where are the bones of the giants? If the Earth was once populated by towering 12-foot-tall beings, massive human-animal hybrids, and an advanced Atlantean civilization that eventually subjugated them, the obvious question is, where is the physical proof? Cayce addressed this extensively, claiming that the evidence was deliberately hidden just before a global cataclysm wiped the giants out entirely. The Final Deluge, circa 10,000 BC. Cayce's timeline places the final catastrophic destruction of Atlantis around 10,000 BC. This event, which Cayce equated to the biblical Great Flood of Noah, served a specific evolutionary purpose. It physically wiped out the last of the giant things and the rogue Atlantean hybrids. The Earth was effectively cleansed so the refined Adamic human form could inherit the planet. The migration of the survivors. Before the final sinking of Atlantis, high priests of the Law of One realized their continent was doomed. Cayce claimed they fled to 3 primary locations: the Pyrenees Mountains near modern-day Spain/France, the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, and ancient Egypt. The Hall of Records, beneath the Sphinx. According to Cayce, the survivors who arrived in Egypt built the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx. Beneath the right paw of the Sphinx, he claimed there is a subterranean vault called the Hall of Records. The contents of the vault. Cayce prophesied that this vault contains the complete, unredacted history of humanity, from the dawn of the thought forms to the fall of Atlantis. Crucially, esoteric researchers who follow Cayce believe that alongside advanced Atlantean crystals and technological blueprints, this vault holds the physical remains, genetic records, and skeletal proofs of the giant beings and the things. To this day, the Association for Research and Enlightenment, ARE, and various independent archaeologists use ground-penetrating radar around the Sphinx and the Bimini coast. hoping to uncover the physical evidence of this forgotten epoch of giants that Cayce saw so clearly in his sleep. The cosmology of Edgar Cayce dismantles the artificial divide between the extraterrestrial and the supernatural, presenting a universe that is fundamentally a school of consciousness rather than a collection of distant, rocky worlds. To understand his perspective on what modern culture labels as aliens, one must discard the science fiction imagery of mechanical craft and biological probes. Instead, Cayce offers a framework where life is omnipresent, existing as a vast, graded scale of vibrational frequencies. In this model, the universe is not an empty vacuum waiting to be traveled by physical ships, but a dense, interconnected web of dimensions, where the spirit, rather than the body, is the primary vehicle of exploration. Cayce taught that the human experience is merely one chapter in a much longer narrative of the soul. Between incarnations on Earth, the entity does not simply fade into a void. It undertakes what Cayce called planetary sojourns. These are not physical journeys through space, but spiritual shifts in consciousness. A soul travels to various planetary and stellar influences, such as Venus, Mars, or the star systems of Arcturus, to imbibe the specific qualities of those spheres. Venus, in this esoteric geography, serves as a center for the cultivation of love and the aesthetic appreciation of beauty, while Mars represents a crucible for the refinement of aggressive energy and the mastery of will. These sojourns are necessary developmental stages that shape the soul's potential before it descends once again into the dense material crucible of Earth. In this context, the entities often identified as extraterrestrials are understood as highly evolved states of being. The term Arcturian, for instance, does not refer to a biological species with a specific physiology, but to a soul that has attained a level of spiritual mastery corresponding to the vibrational frequency of the Arcturus star system. These beings have evolved beyond the necessity of operating within the limits of three-dimensional heavy matter. They are essentially consciousnesses that have graduated from the lower schoolrooms of existence. Contact with such intelligences is therefore not a matter of catching a signal from a distant transmitter, but of tuning one's own consciousness to match the frequency of these higher states of being. They act as mentors and way stations for those of us still entangled in the heavy, repetitive loops of the Earth plane. This cosmological spectrum transitions seamlessly into the realm of angelic beings, whom Cayce viewed not as mythological icons, but as fundamental agents of spiritual physics. Unlike human souls, who voluntarily chose to descend into the density of the physical world, an act that often leads to the ego-driven trap of the prison planet, angels are entities that never separated themselves from the divine. They are pure thought forms, messengers that have maintained perfect alignment with the creative force of the universe. Because they never entered the cycle of birth, death, and material forgetting, they function as permanent, unfallen custodians of the divine law. Archangel Michael stands at the apex of this hierarchy as a supreme spiritual intelligence, often referred to by Cayce as the Lord of the Way. He is not a static figure of religious art, but an active, dynamic force tasked with guarding the Earth plane. His work involves facilitating the struggle of human souls against the inertia of material darkness. Every individual, in Cayce's view, is under the constant, subtle care of these angelic guardians. These beings offer guidance during the dream state, provide intuitive nudges toward higher choices, and work to protect the soul from being utterly consumed by the ego's demands. They are the silent partners in the human mission, serving as the bridge between the limited perspective of the ego and the infinite wisdom of the source. Ultimately, Cayce's synthesis suggests that the distinctions we draw between aliens, angels, and ourselves are illusions imposed by our limited perception of time and space. Whether one is encountering a soul learning in the high-frequency halls of Arcturus or an archangel guiding the destiny of nations, one is dealing with the same fundamental substance, the divine creative force. We are all expressions of this singular intelligence, simply operating at different stages of development and different levels of density. The universe is a unified classroom, and the various manifestations of life, from the lowliest physical form to the highest messenger, are all part of a single, coherent movement toward total conscious reunion with the Source. The alien and the angel are not external entities observing us from afar. They are, in many ways, the reflection of our own potential, existing at different points on the same eternal trajectory. Forget everything you have ever been taught about the concept of sin. Strip away the dogmatic fire and brimstone. Erase the image of an angry, punitive God sitting on a throne, keeping a tally of your mistakes. If we're going to understand the true mechanics of this reality, we have to look through the esoteric lens of Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet. Cayce completely re-engineered the definition of sin, moving it out of the realm of religious guilt and placing it squarely into the realm of spiritual physics, karma, and cosmic evolution. To Cayce, sin was never about breaking an arbitrary set of puritanical rules. Sin is a cosmic malfunction of the human will. Knowledge, not lived, Cayce repeated a single devastating axiom throughout his thousands of trance readings. Knowledge not lived becomes a sin. Think about the weight of that statement. If you are ignorant of a spiritual law and you stumble, you are simply making a mistake. You are a student in the laboratory of the earth, and mistakes are how we learn. But if you possess the gnosis, if you have pierced the veil, if you know what is right, loving, and aligned with the universal order, and you actively choose to do the opposite, that is when you generate deep, binding karma. Sin is the conscious rebellion against the divine law. It is the ultimate act of selfishness. Cayce taught that the original fall of humanity had nothing to do with eating a literal apple in a literal garden. The fall was the soul's deliberate decision to prioritize its own selfish desires over the harmony of the Creator. When we use our will to elevate ourselves at the expense of another soul, we build a wall between ourselves and the Source. As Cayce said, the mind is the builder. When you use your mind to construct destructive, divisive, or hateful reality tunnels, you are sinning against your own divine architecture. The misuse of the creative force. This brings us to one of the most misunderstood concepts in all of human history: sexual sin. Living in the early 20th century, Cayce was surrounded by puritanical shame, but his trance readings cut right through it. He did not view human sexuality as dirty, shameful, or inherently sinful. In fact, he revealed something profound. The sexual drive is the exact same energy as the divine creative force. It is the identical energy that the Creator used to manifest the universe, simply stepping down into the physical vessel. Therefore, sexual sin is not about breaking a religious commandment. It is about the misappropriation and degradation of the highest spiritual energy available to a human being. According to the readings, sexual sin occurs when this immense creative force is weaponized for purely selfish gratification, manipulation, or the exploitation of another. When this energy is decoupled from love, spiritual union, and mutual respect, it reduces a divine current into a base, animalistic transaction. The trap of material density. Why does this matter? Because of the mechanics of spiritual density. The life force, that raw creative power, rests in the lower spiritual centers of the physical body. If an individual uses this energy solely to feed the ego and chase physical pleasure, that energy remains trapped in the lowest frequencies. It acts as an anchor, binding the soul ever tighter to the dense, heavy matrix of this material realm. This is exactly how ancient, advanced civilizations like Atlantis brought about their own destruction. Cayce warned that Atlantis was an advanced technological civilization that destroyed itself through the misuse of power and spiritual decline. They decoupled their massive creative potential from the law of one. They used the divine force for their own entertainment and ego, and in doing so, they collapsed their own reality. If we want to execute the ultimate infinite breakout from this cycle of material density, we must learn to transmute this energy. We must take that raw creative force and raise it upward, transforming biological drive into spiritual enlightenment. integration and the breakout. There is no fiery pit waiting to punish you. Hell is not a place you go. It is a state of karmic repetition you build for yourself. Cayce spoke of reincarnation and karma as part of a spiritual reckoning. The punishment for sin is simply the karma of having to reincarnate and experience the exact conditions you have created over and over until you balance the ledger. To escape this loop, we have to engage in radical shadow integration. We must look at the parts of ourselves that operate in pure selfishness, the parts that misuse our divine energy and bring them into the light. As Cayce promised, for all of God that any individual may know is already within self. You hold the creative force of the universe inside your physical vessel. Do not use it to build your own prison. Use it to build your liberation. The philosophy of the sleeping prophet's spirit is the life, mind is the builder, and the physical is the result. This is the foundational axiom of the work of Edgar Cayce. It asserts that the material world is not a fixed prison, but a malleable construct, shaped entirely by conscious intent and spiritual force. For the mind is the builder, and that which we think upon may become crimes or miracles. There is no time, no space, no condition, but what is relative to the consciousness of the entity. Know that the fault is within self if the world is out of tune. For the universe is a tuning fork, and you are the resonance. Keep the pineal gland operating, and you won't grow old. To actively practice these teachings is to engage in a rigorous protocol of spiritual and biological alchemy. Cayce's work emphasizes holistic healing, spiritual growth, and the law of one. These methods can be integrated into daily life to achieve deeper states of understanding and connection. Methods and protocols. Entering the silence. Cayce accessed his information by entering a deep, self-induced sleep or trance state, bypassing the conscious ego to access the universal memory of nature. To practice this, find a completely quiet environment. Lie flat on your back, removing all restrictive clothing. Place your hands over your solar plexus and move them to your forehead. Focus on slowing the breath and reciting a repetitive rhythmic prayer or intention until the conscious mind steps aside. This is a method of achieving pure insight, allowing you to access unfiltered intuition, confront shadow aspects, and retrieve data from the collective unconscious without interference from the waking ego. Dream incubation and active imagination. Cayce believed that the subconscious mind communicates with the higher self during sleep, offering solutions to physical and spiritual dilemmas. Keep a dedicated ledger by your bed. Before sleeping, write down a specific targeted question or problem you are facing. Command your subconscious to provide the answer in a dream. Upon waking, immediately record any imagery, regardless of how fragmented it seems. Over time, this practice builds a conscious bridge to the unconscious, turning your dreamscape into a theater for active imagination and problem solving. Somatic alchemy. You cannot execute a spiritual breakout if the physical vessel is compromised by heavy or toxic material. Cayce's readings placed massive importance on bodily maintenance as a prerequisite for spiritual clarity. Implement a clean, alkaline-heavy diet composed of vegetables and fruits. Avoid combining starches and proteins at the same meal. Furthermore, utilize castor oil packs placed over the liver and abdomen to draw out toxins and stimulate the lymphatic system. Purifying the biological machine makes it a clearer receiver for higher frequencies. Karmic mapping. Cayce spoke of reincarnation and karma, teaching that karma is not a system of punishment, but simply a ledger of memory, patterns of behavior that the soul must balance. Conduct a rigorous self-audit. Identify your most persistent, irrational fears, toxic relationship patterns, or unexplained affinities. Instead of viewing these as random psychological quirks, map them as inherited karmic loops. By consciously acknowledging these patterns, you integrate the shadow elements of your soul, allowing you to break repetitive cycles and neutralize the karma. Alignment with the law of one. The antidote to destructive hubris is the law of one. This is the ultimate philosophical method. To practice the law of one is to actively dissolve the illusion of separation in your daily life. It means recognizing that the divine intelligence within you is the exact same intelligence within your adversaries. Operating from this frequency disrupts the divisive hierarchical control systems of the world, fostering a unified field of consciousness that resists manipulation. The wisdom of cayce spirit is the life, mind is the builder, and the physical is the result. Thoughts are things, and as their currents run, they become crimes or miracles. Dreams are today's answers to tomorrow's questions. There is no time, no space, no condition, but what is relative to the consciousness of the entity. Individuals do not meet by chance. They are necessary in the experiences of each other. For what is karma? Meeting self. Birth in the physical is death in the spiritual. Death in the physical is the birth in the spiritual. The conqueror of self is greater than he who conquers a world. You grow to heaven. You don't go to heaven. To know and not to do is not to know at all. Keep the pineal gland operating, and you won't grow old. Mind is the builder. Knowledge not lived becomes a sin. All healing comes from the divine. In the application of a truth, there comes the understanding of it. Every test, every trial is an opportunity for growth. Know that the fault is within self, if the world is out of tune. The purpose of the heart is to know yourself to be yourself and yet one with God. Do not let a day pass without forgiving someone. Worry and fear are the greatest foes of normal, healthy physical development. First, know yourself, then know your ideal. All knowledge is within. Man is a universe in miniature. Each soul enters with a mission. We all have a mission to perform. No soul is ever left without guidance. The most important experience of any individual is to know their ideal. Selfishness is the greatest of all sin. As you treat your fellow man, so you treat your creator. The soul is an eternal entity, a portion of the creator. Let your life be a living example of that you profess. Never act until you are positive. When in doubt, don't. What you think and what you eat, combined together, make what you are, physically and mentally. There are no shortcuts to knowledge, to wisdom, to understanding. Only as you apply what you know, may you know more. Prayer is speaking to God. Meditation is listening to God. Hate, malice, and jealousy just create poisons within the minds, the souls, and the bodies of those who entertain them. For the entity is a soul, not merely has a soul. There are no accidents in the divine economy. It is the try that is the more often counted, rather than the success or failure. Use what you have to do what you know to do, and the next step will be given. The greatest fault of all is fault-finding. Keep a physical balance, a mental balance, a spiritual balance. Be ye a channel of blessings to others. A smile and a pleasant word is better than $1,000. It is not what one knows that makes for development, but what one does with what one knows. That which we hate, we become. The purpose of life is to be a companion with God. There is no cure for the body that is not first of the spirit. To have a friend, be a friend. The best physical exercise for anybody is walking. The earth is a school, and we are its students. Every problem is an opportunity to prove the law of love. Know that all force, all power is of the one. Let the heart and mind be single in purpose. Each soul is a universe within itself. What we are is the result of what we have done. A soul is the development of what it has done, is doing, and may do. To know God is to know thyself. See the good in everyone, and you will find it. The mind is the builder. What is held in the mind becomes a reality. Do not try to force conditions, but rather let conditions unfold. Learn to be glad. Learn to be happy. Learn to be joyous. In patience possess ye your souls. Every soul is a co-creator with God. You're exactly where you need to be to learn what you need to learn. Truth is a growing thing. The highest service to God is service to your fellow man. the alchemical matrix, and the sleeping prophet, the ghost in the machine. If you look closely at the history of modern technology, you'll find that the blueprints for our digital future weren't just written by scientists. They were dreamed up by prophets, occultists, and science fiction writers. Think about it. We trace computer science back to Charles Babbage and Alan Turing. Babbage viewed the universe as a vast, programmable calculating engine. Turing cracked the biological code of how patterns organize themselves from chaos. But fast forward to the 20th century and that clean mathematical world gets deeply weird. Sci-fi visionaries like H.G. Wells and Aldous Huxley began warning us about an elite class of technical experts, a technocratic priesthood engineering society through genetics, conditioning, and behavioral control. Philip K. Dick famously experienced visions of Valis, a vast, active living intelligence system from outer space injecting divine information into his mind to break him out of a simulated prison. So where does Edgar Cayce, the famous sleeping prophet, fit into this puzzle? As it turns out, Cayce is the ultimate esoteric counterweight to the forces of pure technocracy. While the architects of the digital age were building a mechanistic world, Cayce was accessing an altered trance state to deliver thousands of readings that challenged the very fabric of raw materialism. Part 1.